I want to make people aware of what the stakes are. People are thinking about AI and they're thinking about large language models. They're thinking about the way that AI can write emails for them now. And that's terrific. But it's so much more than that. AI and the race to artificial general intelligence, which I'm actually in the camp that I think it's going to take longer than many people are projecting right now. That is about the future of our values. It's about the future of Western civilization. It's about the future of my 10 nieces and nephews. It's about the future for your nieces and nephews and the kind of world we want them to live in. And that's why I talk about energy generation and the electricity war for the AI arms race, which we have to build generation to win, but doing it quickly and responsibly.
Welcome to Anchor Change, where we help you panic responsibly in a chaotic world. I'm Katie Harbath. I've navigated impossible trade-offs in tech, politics, and my personal life for decades. I know that can be lonely. As a Midwesterner who spent 20 years in Silicon Valley and DC, it's taken me a while to figure it out. I still am. One thing that helps me is hearing the stories of other people forging their own paths. Because in a world of complexity, you don't have to navigate it alone. Welcome to Anchor Change. Hey, welcome to another episode of Anchor Change. I'm Katie Harbath. Today we have Sarah Hunt, who is the president of the Rainey Center here in DC. It is a nonprofit that works on a wide variety of issues, particularly energy, at both the state and federal level. I'm on the advisory board of the Rainey Center. I've worked with them for quite some time. And the reason I wanted to have Sarah on today is her work at the intersection of AI and energy. This is a topic that I do not think that we are talking enough about the infrastructure that is needed for these AI innovations, what this means for America's competition with China, and also why those who are building this technology, whether it's Silicon Valley or elsewhere, need to understand how they should be engaging with lawmakers at both the state and, again, federal level and globally, in which to make sure that they're able to continue to build the things that they want to build and that we have the infrastructure in which to do it. So I hope you enjoy. Sarah Hunt, welcome to Anchor Change.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for having me. As you are aware, you are one of my favorite humans on Earth. So
And you are one of my
delighted to be
favorite
here.
humans too. So I'm glad we were
Aw,
finally
thank
able
you.
to make this happen.
Me too.
Before we jump in, I have got to have you explain to those who are listening, not watching. Sarah wore a very particular shirt for me today. Sarah, what does it say?
It says ChatGPT didn't stitch this.
I love it. We got to find all the ways to tell people where we aren't using AI.
Yeah. Maybe robots. I mean, I guess robots do some stitching, but ChatGPT doesn't do embroidery yet.
Not yet.
At least this well. No.
Well, Sarah, let's start by having you introduce yourself a little bit, because I wanted to have you on, not just because you're one of my favorite people in the world, but because you work at this really interesting intersection around energy, innovation, and policy. And I was hoping you could start by just explaining a bit about what the Rainey Center does and that work that you're doing at this intersection.
Well, thank you. The Joseph Rainey Center for Public Policy is a think tank and leadership community. What we do is we work with emerging national leaders across the country on the center right. We have a very unique local, state to federal integration of policymakers with whom we work. And we are interested in supporting and nurturing and working with leaders who are governance oriented, who want to solve difficult challenges, who are out there being the doers and the hand raisers and getting the work of governance done. Through that, we have our think tank side, which is really driven by these leaders with whom we work. Our issue areas on the think tank side are energy, national security, tech, free and fair elections, and economic opportunity. We did start with just energy. We started with about 20 policymakers with whom we were working. That's grown substantially over the years, and it started around energy and then spread out to these other areas. Obviously, technology, national security, elections, economic opportunity, it all rolls together, and energy is a big part of all of that. And we're especially seeing that now with the AI arms race, with the energy usage that's required for AI. I've been describing it as an electricity war. We cannot power AI. We cannot power modern society. We can't win the AI arms race with the Chinese Communist Party without a lot of electricity. And one of the things that we're doing with Rainey Center around this is our Energize 2030 initiative. We are doing workshops in states with industry leaders in technology and energy, as well as elected officials and community leaders to try to say, okay, we're all going to get in a room and think about the challenges we're facing in terms of not just for data centers, but energy infrastructure in general and see what we can do. We just had our first one in Utah in August, and we had 4 bills that are being filed that came out of that conversation. A very earnest conversation with that kind of wonderful group of people willing to sit down and say, let's figure this out for our community. Let's figure this out for our country. And really helping these leaders make that connection between, this data center and this utility scale solar project and our national security and the long-term future of the West and democracy in the future that they want for their kids.
Well, let's dive into that a bit more because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, if they're not super involved in this, are sort of like, okay, we've heard that AI uses up a lot of water, it uses up a lot of electricity, but I don't fully understand how all of this is connecting. Can you talk about that a little bit more and how you explain that?
So a data center, and frankly, anytime you are using energy, it involves energy production uses a lot of water to begin with. Then you have data centers, which right now, for example, in Virginia alone, which is where I'm sitting today, there are, I think it's almost 30% of the grid goes to power data centers. We're already seeing right now data centers that are having to go offline because there's not enough electricity to power them. We've seen hyperscalers, trying to buy and generate their own electricity, which creates all kinds of different regulatory and legal and environmental issues that we have to deal with. What's going on is obviously, for the most part, we are choosing consumers over, consumer residential traditional electricity needs over the data centers. But we also have this huge demand from Americans, from consumers, and frankly, for our own country, for our national security, to have an AI system to achieve AGI first as a nation. It's pretty serious when you start thinking about it that way. And we're at a point, and granted, it's not all just AI. China is still modernizing. They have, well over 1 billion people that they're trying to give a certain quality of life, but they are building techs. They're building about, I would say, like last year, they did about 400 gigawatts to our 40 in new generation. That is not enough. We need every electron we can get. We need to start thinking about, okay, yes, data centers need electricity. Industry needs electricity. We all need electricity. We all need energy. We have transportation needs associated with energy. How do we build the infrastructure we need, both responsibly and quickly? And one of the things we're tackling in these workshops that we're doing with Energize 2030 is helping people understand that building quickly and responsibly don't have to be competing interests. We can build quickly and we can build responsibly if we do it right.
Can we really quickly, like, how would you explain this to my parents, for instance? Like, a lot of people, I think, take electricity for granted. Like, we take it for
Mhm.
granted that we are able to turn on our lights and that there is enough energy to go around. And it's been rare when we've had a moment where there's a brownout or a blackout and we don't have access to that. What are the strains on our overall system right now that people need to be thinking about and worried about in terms of that modernization that's needed?
Thinking about your parents, obviously, they want to know that when they flip the switch, the light is going to turn on. They want to know that when they turn the light on or the heat on, that it's not going to be expensive, that they're going to be able to afford it. And what we're seeing right now is a rapid development in technology, in AI, and extraordinary demands for energy to power AI. Every time you use an LLM takes energy. It takes a lot of it. And when you start getting into the national security applications, into the innovation that is required to win the AI arms race with China, we're talking about a lot of electricity. On top of that, we have, and we're still on the early end of the curve. I think after COVID-19, we saw that as a nation, we had a great deal of supply chain vulnerability. We're struggling even to make PPE, protective equipment for our medical care professionals in this country. We struggled with having, healthcare supply chain. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's at HHS, and he's working on some of the things they're doing to secure and nearshore or reshore some of our medication and pharmacy manufacturing. We're in a point where also when we start looking at energy and energy infrastructure in particular, looking at, where is our energy coming from? For example, we need rare earths to build a lot of the chips that we need for AI. We need those for batteries. We need those for coal-fired plants even. We're at a point where we've recognized all of this. So this administration has said we're going to reindustrialize in America. We're going to bring as much manufacturing back here as makes sense. This is part of the tariff policy. So that will create demands. Manufacturing is pretty energy intensive, but we know that we need to do some of this nearshoring and reshoring because COVID exposed our weakness. And if we were in a serious global kinetic conflict, it would be quite troubling for this country. We would struggle. And I'm glad to see us working to correct that. But it does create pressure on electricity costs because of, in some cases, demand and the demand to build. Another problem, a bottleneck, is permitting costs, regulatory costs. The fact that it can take so long for us to build here due to various red tape burdens. A lot of people don't know this, but we have as much solar right now waiting to be connected to the grid as is currently deployed in the entire country. And that's not a building problem, it's a regulatory red tape problem. So we have this convergence of factors of the AI arms race, of reindustrialization, of red tape, of needing to build quickly and responsibly to improve infrastructure. And it's all coming together to create pressures on demand. Sometimes people don't realize that electricity is delivered to you. It's got to be generated. It's got to be transmitted over wires. It has to be connected to your home or to your place of business. All of those things are not, like we do take them for granted. Sometimes folks don't realize, for example, that you can't just generate a bunch of electricity and island it without necessarily connecting it to the grid. Sometimes you can do that, but it isn't often. So one of the conversations we're having to have is around transmission and where, for example, hyperscalers are self-generating and self-generating a lot, and they do need to connect to the grid. Or you have utilities saying, hey, what does this look like? We need to build new wires. Who's going to pay for that? And also, we can't generate enough electricity for this data center, for this tech company over here. So yes, they do need to self-generate. What does all of this look like? Those are conversations that are creating pressure around electricity demand. Another thing that is coming up is EVs, electric vehicles. It's been shown recently are adding to grid demand. And, that's great. It's important to have energy supply diversity, source diversity hardens our energy resilience. And having some folks have gas cars and some folks have electric vehicles when it makes sense for them is really terrific. But that's also adding demand to the grid in some places.
So let's start. I want to start at the state level and then build ourselves up to the federal and global level, because all of
Mm-hmm.
these are very important when we talk about these issues. And one of the things I love about the Rainey Center is how you all are going to that very state legislative level that many other people probably don't pay that much attention to what's happening at their state level. They're very much at the federal level. So what is it that you're working with, and what are state legislators focused on right now when it comes to our energy needs?
It depends on the state. What they're seeing is affordability is a big deal. We've seen that in the elections that just took place. We need for constituents and for citizens to be able to afford their electricity. They're also getting calls from their economic development officials about data center projects that are going to bring in billions in investment, create jobs, generate tax revenue that's going to play for schools, and then learning that, these projects need hundreds of megawatts of reliable power that are going to take 5, 6, 7 years to permit and connect. We don't have that time necessarily. So the most sophisticated legislators understand that we've got to get in and streamline power connections. We've got to look at permitting. We've got to look at how we're going to build quickly and responsibly. We've got to look at workforce issues. This is another challenge. We need infrastructure jobs. We don't have enough electricians and grid technicians in particular. So some legislators are being really smart and looking beyond just the immediate need of how are we going to build the energy infrastructure we need in our state? How are we going to get, families and industry the electricity we need, they're also looking to say, how are we going to have the skilled workers we need to build and maintain our grid and our electricity sector? That's pretty important, and we're excited to be working with some legislators on that issue as well. The thing is that states are the laboratories of democracies. They're where policy innovation can happen much more quickly. And even at the federal level, if you go and you talk to FERC, or you talk to EPA, or you talk to DOE, and you talk to these, or even on Capitol Hill, state regulators, state elected officials, these are people that our federal regulators and our federal elected officials work with and listen to. So when they're out there saying, hey, we've done this great creative public-private partnership, we've done this really smart regulatory tweak that allowed us to build more quickly, what can we do at the federal level? Where does it make sense to replicate those things? Those are good conversations to have too. States can experiment a bit more freely and quickly than the federal government. And one of the things that I'm proud of that we do at the Rainey Center is help bring the best of what the legislators we work with at the state level are doing to the federal policymakers so that they can then implement those or start having those conversations in DC.
Well, that's a fantastic transition then. So, all right. So we're moving to the state level to the federal level. What are the conversations you're having at the federal level? And what is that overlap between the state legislators and then them talking to not just people, members of Congress, but you're having them talk to folks in the administration, various agencies, kind of all across
Mhm.
the board?
For example, I think a good example of this, we worked with some policymakers in our network and stakeholders in a state on a microgrid bill that now some federal offices are taking a look at. I think there's a lot of interest in looking at, regional transmission planning and what that looks like, but doing it with genuine buy-in from state governments and genuine conversation with state governments around, how we're going to do that. There are a couple of states where people want to build wires, transmission lines through those states, but they're not, and the folks in those states are saying, hey, but we're not going to get any of this electricity. How does this work out for us? What is in it for our state here? And helping facilitate some of those conversations. I think permitting reform is going to see a bit of a reemergence as an issue now that the shutdown is over. There's a lot of interest in getting more permit reform done, hopefully this year, potentially with a transmission component around that. That will be very important. I think of federal permitting reform as something that's iterative. We're just doing a little bit at a time. It would be lovely if we could do a whole bunch at once, but I think the reality is the nature of that conversation is going to be what can we get done by the end of this year? What could we get done next year? And that's going to be really important, especially after how much affordability seems to be playing a role in the national conversation around politics and elections. There's definitely a bipartisan recognition that we need to build more energy infrastructure. I think one of the questions is who is going to pay for it, when, and how? Ratepayers pay. We've got tech companies that need to pay. And honestly, for some national security applications, obviously the federal government needs to pay. That's one reason I'm very excited to see DOE and the Department of Defense working on deploying more nuclear and small modular reactors on defense installations to help generate there. I think that's really smart because it allows them to build quickly and build responsibly in secure areas.
So now let's take it global. You've been talking a little bit about what
Mhm.
China has been doing. They're probably the main ones that in this energy race that America is looking at. But how is the US positioned globally in the energy race in terms of investment, not just on electric and the grid, but also all of the AI infrastructure?
Right now, I would say that the AI arms race and the energy electricity war, it really is between the United States and China. Europe is struggling a bit. They've had this very difficult conflict in Ukraine, which some argue is largely about energy. They've seen, they're kind of going through their motions of how they want to meet certain environmental goals while also continuing to meet their energy goals as aggressive. They don't have the kind of tech sector and innovative tech sector that we do in the US. They do have some amazing, interesting companies there, but the United States is the global leader in technology and software. But China is working very hard to catch up with us, and they are doing a good job. Just on the education front, I think one of the biggest national security crises that we face right now is if you look at what China is doing in terms of their math and science test scores versus where we are. Our math and science test scores are not doing well compared to the Chinese. That's our next generation of innovators right there. And we need to be thinking about that, as well as the fact that China is building a great deal more energy infrastructure than we are right now, and they're building everything. They're building wind, they're building solar, they're building coal, they're building nuclear, they're building hydro, and we need to meet we need to meet them gigawatt for gigawatt, if not terawatt to gigawatt. Otherwise, we're not going to win the AI arms race for artificial general intelligence. And that has tremendous implications for the rest of the globe. We have a very different vision than the Chinese Communist Party for human agency, for human flourishing, and for what a government and the relationship between the state and the government looks like. This is going to be what decides whether or not AI is really used only for surveillance on behalf of, or not only, but primarily for surveillance on behalf of the state and for subjugation or to help propel humanity forward. And I believe that American values that embrace freedom, that embrace equality, that want opportunity for everyone will be the best thing to leverage AI for the benefit of humanity rather than its subjugation. And that's really, to me, where the conversation is at that 10,000-foot philosophical level. It's easy to say those things. It's a lot harder to break down the silos between the AI community, utilities, grid operators, and policymakers to try to help them have a conversation instead of talk past each other. It's a lot harder to say, all right, we're very dependent on China in many ways. They manufacture a lot of things that Americans rely on. And how do we deal with that? How do we develop a relationship with them that allows us to win the AI arms race, but is also respectful in terms of our trade partnership with them? These are difficult questions, but that's one reason why I'm excited about the work that we do at the Rainey Center, especially with cross-sector convening, bringing people together from whether it's stakeholders, industry experts, et cetera, to have discussions about what's going on. Because so often I see, even in DC, and you ask, like, how is the U.S. positioned globally? That's a great DC question. We think about it all the time, and we should, but we're not necessarily in communities day to day saying, hey, what do you think about this data center? Who's going to build the road that's going to allow the dump trucks and the cranes and the bulldozers to go out here to this remote area where they want to build the data center? How are we going to get electricity there? What's a fair tax rate for this data center? What benefits is it going to bring to the community? How many jobs is it actually going to create? All more difficult. These are all things that we don't think about in DC sometimes. Going to communities, going down to the state level, going down to the local level and saying, hey, what are your challenges? And I think that's one of the unique things that the Rainey Center brings to the table is that we start there. We don't say, hey, what is this great policy idea? We start with going to leaders at the state and local level and even the federal level and saying, what problems are you seeing? What research can we do? What conversations can we convene to help you solve those problems?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I always think about the West Wing, which everybody who listens knows I love it. But when CJ gets offered when she's done with being chief of staff and the Frank Hollis, the billionaire, is like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the problem that nobody wants to solve? And she's like, roads. She's like, infrastructure, like, right? Like, how do you get the food to the places, like all of that? And you make a good point about it's not just going and building the data center, it's all the parts that go to it. But then also, too, you were saying about the jobs. Even OpenAI was saying, hey, we need more electricians, we need more of that. The problem is once the data center is built, you don't necessarily need as many people anymore. And so then how do you think about that in a flexible workforce where what you need, and maybe you have a
Mm-hmm.
thought on that. Maybe I'm thinking about that wrong, but I
Yeah.
usually remember like the investment in the number of people you need to build a data center versus run a data center is very different.
Absolutely. But what I would say is we always need electricians, right? Once the electrician might be done with this, or grid technician might be done with this project, they're going to have another one. I know less about the construction industry, but I don't think that we have electricians and grid technicians and linemen at any risk of not being out of not having continued work. The question is, yes, we do need to build, and we're going to continue to need to build and maintain. This isn't a sprint. Yeah, we need to build a lot in the next few years, but we're going to continue to need to build. I don't see a need for those kind of jobs to last I don't see a need for those kind of jobs to come in and be there and then go away. I think we do need to be honest about how many jobs are created and what kind of long-term jobs they are. Even if you look in the energy industry, whether it's running an oil rig or putting up, a wind turbine, there are a lot more jobs up front and then there are fewer jobs required to maintain. That is normal. We just need to make sure that we are building a workforce that has these basic skills that they need to not only be adaptable in the age of technology, but yeah, we're always going to need electricians. That's not a need that's going away anytime soon.
So you gave a fantastic talk at my alma mater, University of Wisconsin-Madison, recently. I'll put the link in the show notes for
Oh,
people who
thank
want
you.
to listen to that. I'm bummed I couldn't actually go and see it in person, but I watched it online. But you
I know
talked a
we were
lot about
both speaking on your campus on the same day
we
at
were,
the
which
same
was
time.
totally random.
Yes,
We
it was so random.
did not plan that at all.
No, we didn't.
But it was lovely to have you up on my campus, though, and be able to I know it wasn't your first time, but to show you around a little bit. But in that speech, you were talking a bit about some of the themes that are top of mind for you and where you see sort of this debate around AI and energy going. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit, given that we're very close to 2026 and there's a lot of planning for next year. What are the things you're watching and keeping an eye on and wanting to work on?
For me personally, around this particular issue, I want to make people aware of what the stakes are. People are thinking about AI and they're thinking about large language models. They're thinking about the way that AI can write emails for them now. And that's terrific. But it's so much more than that. AI and the race to artificial general intelligence, which I'm actually in the camp that I think it's going to take longer than many people are projecting right now. That is about the future of our values. It's about the future of Western civilization. It's about the future of my 10 nieces and nephews. It's about the future for your nieces and nephews and the kind of world we want them to live in. And that's why I talk about energy generation and the electricity war for the AI arms race, which we have to build generation to win, but doing it quickly and responsibly. There are ways that we can, maybe even using AI, allow for appropriate community input and environmental monitoring. I was talking to a friend of mine who works in mine safety, who was saying that now there's a company that makes glasses that you can put on. They're connected to the internet. You go into the mine and you can take a picture and it can help you actually call into your vision field and project the statute or the regulation that you're looking at and kind of make determinations like, is this in compliance? Is this safe? Is it not? And then it can even file the report for you by the time you've left the mine. So you don't have to go back to your desk to type it up. And it has the capacity to help make mines a lot safer and to improve communication between the mining industry and the regulators and to streamline red tape to make sure that we're getting what we need from the mining industry in a very safe way that's also responsible. We can use AI to help us do that, but we need to keep that in mind. Strengths that we have as a country is that we do engage and we do value our citizens. We do value our people. We want to listen. We want to know what is going on and how certain projects will affect communities. This is one of the things that really distinguishes us and Western values, which have given us the freest, fairest societies in world history with the most opportunity for the most people. And if we lose the AI arms race to the Chinese Communist Party and their vision of the future, all of that could be at risk. But in the process of doing that, I want us all to be aware, but also be aware of the fact that we need to bring our values to bear when we are trying to build, when we are having these conversations, that the ends do not justify the means, and that what makes us different is that we want the means to be just as well.
And I'm wondering too, like, what are the partnerships or cross-sector collaborations you're thinking are most critical right now as we think about that and making sure AI drives that type of resilience rather than instability for us?
One of the first things that comes to mind is the administration has been working to put together a critical rare earth minerals partnership with allies. Obviously, in the U.S., we're not blessed with every critical mineral that we need. So we need to have partnerships with allies around critical minerals extraction, processing, and supply chains. That is at a global level. We also need our technology companies and utility companies to continue to grow in their communications and to help understand each other better. Technology companies move really fast. Utility companies have traditional planning cycles that are really too slow for the pace of AI development. We're trying to facilitate some of those conversations and what does the policy behind that need to look like. Also, we've got In this nation, we need deeper partnerships between national labs, between universities, between the private sector. Public private partnerships are a wonderful strength of this country. It's what helped us win the race to the moon. It's what helped us win World War II. It's what brought us the fracking revolution, which has really upended geopolitics and put us in a much stronger position as a nation in terms of energy production. So we need that for the AI arms race as well. I think there's also, security aspects to all of this that are very critical and important. An area of expertise of mine. I have a brother who is actually a cybersecurity genius and does all of that. I do not, but cybersecurity issues are a very, very big deal in AI. Where is our data being stored? Who has it? Right now, and I'm just kind of quoting off I think I recall correctly, about 80% of data from US home security camera systems is actually stored in data centers in China because we don't have the ability to store them here. And, that presents that presents a national security threat, right? Do we really want data centers in China to have video of everyone's houses inside? We may not. These are things that we need to be thinking about and communicating to folks like your mom and dad, why we need to build some of these data centers here, even if they're big and might be ugly. And we also have to have a commitment to communities that if we're building these things for national security or for the tech industry, that the right people are going to pay the right freight and that everyday families are not going to bear a disproportionate burden of the costs of energy.
So, Sarah, what's the best way for people to find the work of the Rainey Center? How can they work with you? What's the best way for them to learn more and get in touch?
You can visit us at rainycenter.org on the internet. We're also Rainey Center on X. We're Rainey Center on Instagram. We're Rainey Center on Facebook. You can find us and follow us there. You can also find me. I'm Sarah E. Hunt01 on X and I think most other platforms. We have a really good time at the Rainey Center engaging with policymakers, with communities, with our great American private sector. And we would love to work with more of your listeners. And we're so grateful for some of the partnership that we've had with you over the years. You've been on our advisory board for a long time. We did a great we've done some great public opinion research on artificial intelligence and elections and democracy with you. I hope we can continue to do more of that. We do regular polling. So if you go to rainycenter.org, we have a polling capacity. We've got a great polling team. If you're interested in public opinion research on AI, on technology, on energy, we are asking all of these questions, and you can, again, find that at rainycenter.org.
And I'll make sure to put links to all of that in the show notes. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that I get to come back again.
Absolutely. A huge thank you to Sarah for joining us. I think it's really interesting how all of these different issues, as she mentioned, about energy, technology, the economy, et cetera, are all converging into one. And I also think that it's really important for us to be looking at how this is playing out at the state level, national, and federal. I also love that story she told about in the mine about having glasses, like, Meta has those Ray-Ban glasses, that she was talking about using it to help to comply with different regulations. But I was also thinking about how the fact that you could use those glasses to be better understand potentially where the material is that you need to mine, where the veins are, where all sorts of different things that AI is going to be able to help people to do. And so I'm going to put links to all the Rainey Center stuff in the show notes. As you all know, I write about all of this at anchorchange.substack.com. But until next time, thanks for joining us.